Welcome to our listening audience. Today is a fascinating discussion. We're talking with Theron Skees. He's an amazingly creative talent, and he's a storyteller. And he's had a profound impact on so many people in the entertainment industry along the way. We actually met through a mutual friend who works for Crew, and our paths crossed there, but they never crossed when we were at Disney, as we were both traveling like crazy. And as I was director of international marketing and sales, and he was all over the world with cruise ships and all kinds of things. But he'll tell that story. He's a master storyteller, a former Disney Imagineer. He's a creative executive, and he's got over 20 years experience assembling teams, 30 years in themed entertainment, and he's highly respected all over the world. So there's so many things I admire about Theron, but what always stands out to me has been his commitment to his faith, his family, and his incredible knowledge to help others expand their own creativity. So Theron, let's just dive right in.
Awesome.
Yeah, how are you today?
I'm very well. Thanks for the invitation. It's a real pleasure to be with you today.
That's great. Well, you've had an amazing and hugely successful career. Tell our audience, how you got started on this path and what led you into it early days.
It's it's a long story, so I'll try to be concise. But I think I could boil it down to, believe it or not, Star Wars. When Star Wars came out in 1977, I was 10 and went to see it, and it had such a profound impact on my growing up years, right, formative years. And I probably would have described it then very differently than I do today, having the experience that I have as a storyteller and retrospectively looking back. I think it was this exposure to this idea of a portal into another world. And there was, galaxies and spaceships and aliens, and it was just such a mind opening kind of experience that I remember thinking, I want to do that. And even though I couldn't define that as a 10-year-old, it put me on a path to pursue a desire to be in film, not in front of the camera, mind you, but behind the camera, and really taking part in building these artificial worlds and taking people to them. And I did have some success in film and really learned an immense amount. Probably my first PhD, if you will, in learning about creating these worlds was in that pursuit. But I got to a crossroads, and I really felt that it wasn't the career for me. My wife was at home. We had three little kids, babies, and I was making the best money of my life, but I was away from her for like 6 weeks, and I just realized it just wasn't right for me. God had really impressed upon me that it just wasn't the right thing. So I finished the film that I was on, which was Stargate, moved back to Florida because I was working in Yuma, Arizona, and I didn't know what was going to become of me. And from there, I just had faith and trusted, and God led me to the themed entertainment industry. And I've started working at Universal Studios and made contacts and just grew and learned, and that was my next PhD was all of the work just transitioning the idea of telling a story on film into doing it in a permanent way in theme parks. That's kind of how I came about working in this crazy
Yeah.
industry.
Well, Universal has certainly set some pretty high bars with the Spider-Man attraction was one of the most interesting I've ever seen, and I've been
Mm.
to a lot of theme parks from Disneyland Paris, Hong Kong, or whatever. But that some of the creativity that goes into that, and now they're building Epic Universe. We're all excited here. And by the way, they are anybody out there looking for a job, they're only hiring 17,000 more people here in Orlando for Epic Universe right now.
Great
So
point.
then what happened?
Well, I worked with my first job in themed entertainment was at Disneyland Paris. So back then it was called Euro Disneyland, and I was brought on board as what you would call a field art director. So somebody that had a combined knowledge of construction but also a profound understanding of storytelling and art. And in that role, I worked in artificial rock work, which I learned and really began to hone at the Universal Studios project. Met a gentleman there by the name of Jolt Hormet, and he went to work straight away with Paris and started leading that artificial rock work role for that entire resort. And he gave me a call and said, "Look, we really need help. Could you come over?" So that's what I did, and I was the artificial rockwork art director for Pirates of the Caribbean, my favorite attraction there specifically, and that's kind of how I started with Disney. I came back. It was goodness, that was 90. I think I got back to the U.S. in 92. Imagineering wasn't hiring, so I went and did a whole nother role with an electronics startup company, and I was heading up design. They had a very thematic approach to their products and et cetera. About 5 years doing that, and then left there and came back and started at Walt Disney Imagineering. I actually consulted for a year for them, again doing field art direction work, and then in 1997, I was hired full time. Sorry, that was 1998. 97, I consulted. 98, I was hired full time as the art director for the Disney MGM studios at the time. And so that's kind of how I started with Imagineering, and that was a 23-year career with Imagineering.
Wow, I was at the opening of Euro Disney in the day because we were contracting all the international tour operators, etc., and mirroring what we did for Walt Disney World, where we created about a $500 million of revenue. And as a consultant, when you went in, what were some of the things you focused on, as a consultant? Because that's a little bit different role than full-time employee. And right now, we built our Kingdom Growth Engine software for consultants to be able to not only prove it, but also prove the worth and the value of what small incremental changes are. But it also keeps the consultant on the job because a lot of consultants kind of blow out after the first 4 or 5 months. They've done what they can do. So how did you manage to stay engaged, and what did you focus on?
That's a really great questions. I think another factor to consider here was I was pretty young. I was the youngest art director in the entire project. I was 25 years old. I just had married one baby. This goes back quite a ways, and I was in charge of like 40 people on the project. We had plaster crew, we had a welding crew, we had carving crew, and for me, I think I've always was blessed with the ability to be a leader. So being a leader, on site and on a construction site wasn't new for me. It wasn't hard. I grew up building. My dad was a builder, so I grew up on a job site, and I kind of understood that that level of commitment. As a consultant now, I really understand what you're talking about and the conversations that you and I have had about your software because I was laid off from Disney in 2020 thanks to COVID, but it actually ended up being the best move of my entire professional career because now, as I run my own firm, that's what I do all the time is consult and to help other firms. And I personally, I thrive off of the variety of different types of things that I do, different ways that I help people. So as a consultant for me, starting way back then and then being able to, back then we called it freelance, but I kind of thrive in that environment, honestly. I love it.
Yeah, there's a lot of diversity in it. Over the past probably 10 years, I've done over 50 different consulting projects, and it ranges from armed guard security and 150 ex-military people in Albuquerque, and now they're in Beverly Hills and Portland and Scottsdale. They've grown that company really huge. Flooring, which actually turned out to be very interesting, and architecture. You think about a sales pipeline with architecture, and I know some of your projects are that way, where you bid on the project, but from the initial inception of the ideal client, getting them into your quote funnel and moving them along. In architecture, that can be 18 months,
Wow.
2 years, as opposed to,
Yeah.
a power and water sports company where the guy walks in and looks at the bass boat and it's 2 weeks. It's actually the same weekend if his wife is with him and he doesn't have to go home and say, honey, I just bought a $40,000 bass boat, So if she's with him, then it's a sale. So just that whole cycle time is thing. So what was maybe a crisis point in your career a challenge you face? How did you face it, and what was the outcome?
It's those are the moments I think that really define us, right? Is those moments where we're stuck in a situation and you that's really difficult. And for me, this moment was I was the executive creative director with Walt Disney Imagineering during the Disney Springs project. It was my project to co-lead with a project delivery executive, and that particular moment came at what we would call CD, construction documentation level of design. So at that moment, you're done. The drawings are done. You're turning over to your contractor. In fact, in this instance, there was already construction happening, and design is really meant to be pencils down, finished. And it was discovered through a whole lot of other reasons, not over design, not creative, and creative always gets blamed for adding a lot of things. But we would discover we were $40 million over budget, and it was devastating to hear that. Again, there was a lot of other just reasons why that happened, primarily the way the project was actually contracted. So what do you do when you're faced with that, right? You're working for a company, a legacy brand, Disney, and you can't just slice something out, right? You can't just oh, we won't do that building, and you can't just minimize. We're just not going to do this level of ornamentation or this level of finish, even in a place like Disney Springs, which, by the way, for the company, they didn't know how, the company didn't quite know how to define that. Is it a themed environment? Is it an outdoor mall? We're not really sure. So, as the creative lead, I set about defining that. It is distinctly Disney, but it has to be a Disney branded umbrella under which all of these other brands have to be able to live and coexist in a sense within that brand. So that's what added even more pressure to how do you mitigate $40 million within the budget and not destroy all of that. So
Yeah.
that was a real challenge for the team.
Yeah, that is a huge challenge, and I'm intimately involved with Disney Springs as my wife is there right now as we speak, 36 years, and
Well, that's amazing.
she's a guest relations leader, and I remember when one of my other business partners back in the day started Rainforest Cafe. It was a famous Dave, barbecue guy, also
Mm,
with Steve Schussler, who I know you're very familiar with. So he and
yeah.
Steve actually took his house and turned it into rainforest and invited people to come up into his house. And when you walked in his front door, there was fog everywhere and there was themed things.
That
And he
sounds
turned
like
his whole,
Steve.
and then it turned the whole house into that, and then invited all the different investors and people, etc. And Dave just jumped on immediately, and they took that company, Rainforest, public. With one at Mall of America, and the second one I believe was at Disney, and of course Steve's gone on to Yak and Yeti and T
Yeah.
Rex and all those
A
others. Very, very,
boathouse.
very creative. Yeah, the Boathouse. I didn't know that the Boathouse was actually owned by the group that owns Gibson Steakhouse in Chicago.
That's right. That's
And
right. They operate. Yep.
yeah, we ate there 2 weeks ago, and we looked at the bottom when we got our takeout on the bottom, and we go, "What? The Boathouse?" And the waiter came over and said, "Oh, I always wanted to go there." So yeah, it's a great concept, really fun stuff. They were going around Lake Minnetonka in the boats when they were trying to sell
Yep.
that concept. So,
Yep.
and
Yep. That was fun. That was really fun.
yeah, it's a lot of fun. So what are you working on now, and what's happening with you now? What are you doing?
Well, I kind of hung my own shingle, if you will, in 2020. It's called the Designers Creative Studio. I knew that I didn't want to be a large design firm. I don't want to payroll employees, heaven help us, I don't want an HR department. I didn't want any of that. I just wanted to work on some really exciting and wonderful projects with great colleagues and with great clients. And I told my wife when I started, I said, "Look, I know we're used to weekly paychecks at the Disney company, right? You'll remember this acronym, EPCOT. Every paycheck comes on Thursday, and that was such a wonderful thing that you got used to for nearly 30 years, and your executive benefit packages as a VP, and so here I'm striking out on my own, and my wife is like, okay, we got bills to pay. And I told her, I said, look, babe, I don't want to work with jerks. I don't care how much money they have. I just I just don't want to do that. And she nervously said, I trust you. And I've had to turn away some potential clients and jobs to be true to that mission. And there were some very interesting times that required, of course, a lot of faith and trust during that time. But I have to say, Don, it really has been the best move of my professional career. I love the freedom that I have now. I love the ability to expand and do something really large or to stay small. I really love the idea of helping at, I do quite a lot of early stage work with investment firms or C-suites or even governments and help them strategically at that beginning to grow their brand, to grow revenue, to grow their audience, to let's build a brand. We have this destination that we're creating. So I love the variety of opportunities there and have actually worked more internationally than I have domestically. And strangely, from an Imagineer, I would imagine your audience would not expect to hear this. I don't do a lot in the world of theme parks. I do quite a lot in urban design, gigacity projects. As you might have guessed, I do quite a lot of work in Saudi Arabia, and that type of thing. And then I also help quite a lot with other design firms, companies. I just did a big work session with a U.S. bank and worked with all of their designers worldwide. There's a whole group from India that joined and everything. That I love. I think it's so rewarding to be engaged at that level with all of these different companies.
There's so many layers that go into that. I remember getting a call in the early, I think it's about 2003 or so, from a guy in Minnesota, and he said, "Hey, listen, I'm partnering with Dave Anderson of Famous Dave's Barbecue, and he had Grand Casinos. He had three public companies, and he said, I really want to do an indoor water park hotel. The Wisconsin Dells got famous for their indoor water parks and became kind of a mecca. But
Mm,
Chicago land market is about 3.5 hours drive, and on Sunday coming back on 94, you're bumper to bumper, and
right.
so we bought the land across from Six Flags Great America and took that north corner from Auto Nation, Roger Staubach, and across from Gurney Mills, and we built a 520 room indoor water park hotel with 100,000 square feet of water park to cut off all that traffic to the Dells so that they didn't, if you wanted to have your kid's birthday, I grew up in Chicago and I love it. And it is the most beautiful place in the world for about 3, 4 months. And then it turns gray for the winter time. Even the snow
Right.
is just horrible. It's gray, it's slushy, it's cold, it's windy. But
That's real cold. I mean,
yeah, it's
Chicago's real cold.
real cold. So anyway, we spent 2.5 years. We got the city of Gurnee to actually give us tax increment funding, TIF money, which they said they would never do. But we got it built, and it took 2.5 years. But that whole iteration process, from working with the designers, and we used the next Disney Imagineer that Hugh Darley and his group. He did
Mm,
a lot of the concept work for us.
nice.
So it was a great project. I was just saw it the other day. It actually got bought by Great Wolf Lodge, and it's
Ah,
part of their chain.
sounds like that. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So,
that sounds
but
perfect.
but you've worked with a lot of interesting people and leaders over the years. What were some of the leaders you really admired, and I mean, you were there. Well, I know you know Lee Cockrell really well. He's one of my heroes in operations because he was at Euro
Definitely.
Disney when I was going back and forth, and then when he came to Orlando, I think he had probably 40,000 people reporting to him, in operations.
Unbelievable.
How do you even do that? But he still speaks, teaches, and writes. So, and we see him for coffee every now and then and catch up. I actually used his book, Creating the Magic, for my
Mm,
hospitality students that I'm teaching at university level. He's the capstone course. They have to get through his Creating the Magic and also take his time management class, which he was famous
nice.
for. And of course, I had to take it twice because I think I flunked it the first time. So, but anyway, what were
Well,
some leaders, without naming names specifically or whatever, the attributes or whatever that you really admired, or what were some of the challenging ones?
I think for me, working in Imagineering, I had the great pleasure of being in an organization that was at the same exact time insulated and separate from the world of Disney operations, but at the same time, it was also a part of and embedded in the Disney operations. So that was a real a dichotomy that I think created a lot of interesting challenges with the company. For me
Hmm.
as a leader, it was incredible because at one project you can be completely in the creative mode where you're 100% fully sort of isolated. I don't say isolated, but you're not embedded in the operation
Hmm.
and you're leading a project. And then I've also spent quite a lot of my career embedded with the operator in a role where you're partnering day in and day out with all of the operations teams. I think that those two things produced a whole lot of relationships. Sorry, produced a whole lot of relationships that were quite interesting. Some were aggressively opposed to each other because my role and the operations roles, those are
Hmm.
at sometimes at odd with each other. And then what you have to do is seek for ways to merge those things together. So I had a lot of great leaders on the WDI side that were inspirational, that were um, great mentors, great teachers, good guides, people that helped me through everything process, time management, storytelling, how to dimensionalize brand, as it were. And then on the from the operations side, you mentioned like a Lee Cockrell. I had some great mentors and partners from operations that I felt like the partner of choice because I have a great appreciation and understanding and acumen in the business world. It gave me the opportunity to stretch in that way and really support those businesses. So the challenging relationships on both sides, I'd like to think forced me to be better, a
Hmm.
better communicator, a better listener. Um, I'm the mindset, and I teach a lot and mentor a lot on this, is that you never burn a bridge. I not only think that that's an important tenet of my faith, but I also believe that it's really good business practice. No matter how terrible the relationship might be, no matter how how do I say this? How
Challenging.
directly nasty or challenging those individuals can be to
Hmm.
you, of which I've experienced a lot of that. It's very important never to burn a bridge because you're representing your faith walk by not doing that, right?
Yeah.
By doing the opposite of what's expected from a human in those times. So great growth comes from that, and even though there's pain, there's always gain, and I always counted that as the important part.
Yeah. It's like the Pixar storyline. It's always once upon a time there was a da 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 da, and it's always there. But then it goes to Act Two, and goes into the
Right.
dark side. But because of that, and then this, and then this, but then it
Yeah,
comes full circle. So, what are
that's right.
some key skills or maybe attributes or talents you'd advise someone to continue to develop at whatever stage career you're in, whether you're, at my stage, I'm in the fourth quarter, probably. But there's a lot of students. There's a lot of people in the mid tiers or are still building their business. What skills, attributes, or talents would you advise somebody to develop to equip them? Because the marketplace is changing and the world is changing quickly with a lot of introduction of AI and other things. But what do you recommend that somebody focus on?
It's a really great question, Don. There's quite a few categories there. One area that I would focus on the most is, and whether that's a CEO, because I have a professional coaching service that I offer, and I speak to students, I speak to pros in the industry, and then C-suites as well. And I always say, look, there's a balance between your hard skills, the things that you learn to do, that you get licensed to do, things you go to school to do, and those are important, but your soft skills are equally, if not sometimes more important. That's your ability to compromise, your negotiation skills, your ability to listen, all of those things. So working to keep those two things in balance, I think is really, really important. It is really true. I always say that a person's superpower is their ability to listen, right? Whether it's on a team and you're with colleagues, you need to listen, and you need to listen to what they're saying, what they're bringing to the table, and processing, and that affects your work, your output as well. But also with clients, with users, listening is a superpower that unfortunately is failing in our society. I think because of so much social media and individualism, especially in the West, it puts us in a place where we're always thinking about the next thing that we're going to say, and we're not listening to what is
That's
being
right.
said. So that I think is a superpower, that it doesn't matter where you are on the food chain hierarchy in the world of business or art or design. I think that's a skill that people can benefit. The other thing that I would say is what I teach is this idea of learn, adapt, and implement. This cycle in our lives, whether it's our personal lives, our business lives. And I learned this firsthand at Disney, because every single role that I had at Disney, from my first role as art director to my last role as portfolio senior executive at Disney Cruise Lines for Imagineering, it was always a new role. I had never done that before. When I got hired, I was hired as an art director for the whole park. Never done that before. Here I'm now managing what amounts to billions of dollars in a physical asset and partnering daily with an entire operations team that was extremely dynamic and very, very diverse. Never did that before. So it caused me to instantly have to learn. I was in learn mode. And then as soon as I learned a skill, something got revealed to me I didn't realize before, I immediately had to adapt myself and then implement that, and then start again and learn, adapt, and implement. And I just think if we have that in our minds, that you never stop learning, you must be curious. I always say terminally curious, right? You just can't give up the desire to wanting to know more and learn more. And I think if you just lean into those few areas, it'll help you be
Now,
successful.
Sobel wrote a great book. It's called Power Questions. It's a wonderful book, and we've used it for the last 10 years. But it's just about the power is in asking really good questions. And also, I take a page
Mm.
out of Ted Lasso, where he said, "Be curious, not judgmental." I wonder why.
Yeah,
Have you
that's
ever
great.
played darts before, Ted? Well, thanks for asking. Actually, I have. My dad and I played every Sunday until he died for years. And as teaches Rupert a lesson in that and said, but you know what? All those
Mm.
fellows that judged me, they weren't curious. They didn't want to know. So be curious, not
Yeah.
judgmental. I love it. That's great.
It's always easy to tear something down than to create something and
Do
build it
you,
from nothing. There's a lot of people out there who are very judgmental. It's easy to be a critic, right? but it's very difficult to start with a blank page and create something from nothing with a group of very talented people. And it's something that lasts for ages and ages, and generations of people get to experience it. I hope that more people get to experience that process as I did, because it's life changing. It really puts you in a different place, and I don't know. I felt so much meaning in what I've done in my career
Yeah,
because of that.
that's very, very powerful, and that people's creativity can be unleashed. I always thought I was not creative because if you put a pen in my hand and said draw a horse, there's I could get beat by a 5-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, you name it. You know, I just don't have that talent. Uh, but I have learned that I can be wildly creative. I come up with very creative solutions, and you know, as I teach sailing and I'm teaching my hospitality students, I'm actually going to do Rosen School of
Mm.
Hospitality next week to an audience. Yeah,
Oh,
so I'm
fantastic.
working through what am I going to say for an hour and a half to that group, you know, on parks and stuff. So, but that whole process
Nice.
of learning and repeating and being curious and being open to, you know, asking the right questions and learning. A lot of times those frontline people know way more about the operation. And my last question to you
That's right.
is, did you find yourself at sometimes feeling vulnerable? I know Ed Catmull at Pixar talks about how when they're pitching a story or a concept, that blank piece of paper that you wrote, and you're in front of all of your peers, and they're going to weigh in on it. They're
Yeah.
going to talk to you about, yeah, I think that's a no, you know, or whatever. Putting your art
Yeah.
out there for somebody to judge, does that leave you a little bit vulnerable sometimes?
It's a really interesting perspective, because I think that that's an area that of creative. You know, if you think of creative in general, in the design world, anyways, that is not really appreciated much by the business world as such, and that it is, you have to be this endless well of creative ideas, and you're constantly taking risks, and it is a risk to stand in front of a room of very high-powered senior leaders that represent a client, and you're bringing a creative solution that will fundamentally change their business for the positive. At least that's why you were hired. I always saw that perspective when I was an Imagineer, in the room with a Bob Iger or any of those leaders, and I always saw it that way. They are a client. They hired me to do this work, and that took a little bit of the pressure off, honestly, because I felt like I have so many stories. I know design so well, not braggadociously, but that I was confident in my ability that if this idea didn't work, I had another 3, 4, or 5 ideas. And I worked with a team of people that had 50 more ideas that we'd bring to the table. So it is a risk, and if you get no reward, you get no innovation if you
Yeah.
don't take risks. But I chose to look at it, and I tried to mentor my teams, and I talked to a lot of creative people today, and try to pass this on, that you're in the business of design, right? Design uses art, but design is not art. Design solves a problem, design grows businesses, design's intent is to make money, right? So I help young Imagineers, for example, learn that this $100 million project I'm on, it's not your personal art fund. You're not out there creating something that necessarily that you want. You're creating something for a client that solves their business problem. One. Two, it has to make what you create, it has to make an emotional connection with that client's guests. And if you do it really, really well, those clients' guests or those clients' customers make an emotional connection to the thing that you've made, this experience, this branded experience. And if you do it well and the client operates it well, those customers become audience members. That's the secret right there. So that's what I learned in my time. Otherwise, you walk around constantly bruised and you walk around feeling defeated, if you assign personal ownership over those ideas. I talk a lot about this, in fact, that in a sense you're like an idea vending machine. And you don't have, when you're working at a legacy brand like Disney, for example, you don't have the luxury of standing in the room with Bob Iger, or any of those leaders, and have them look at you and say, this just doesn't work. What else do you have? You don't have that luxury of saying, Bob, give me a week or so. I'm going to go back and figure some things out. You need to have those things right on the tip of your tongue. Well, what if we took this and what if we did that? And how about if we mash these things together? You have to have a deep, deep well of ideas and how stories can play out. And you have to have those ready. And so that's a tall order, and it takes a while to be mature enough to be in that place. But that's where you got to be.
That's a great point, and there are so many parallels to our consulting work that we do, because it really is very similar. You're in front of the owner and the senior team, whoever's leading sales, operations, and finance, and you're going to help them get there and show them what these incremental changes mean. And so you have to be willing to not be the shell answer man, ask great questions, leading questions, but you also have to be able to deliver over and over. And when you hit the roadblocks, be able to, pivot and say, okay, we tried an SEO campaign, we did this, but here's where we're going next. Let's keep moving forward. And so there's a lot of parallels.
Yeah.
This has been an amazing time, and I'm so happy to get a chance to talk to you about this. Theron, if somebody wants to connect with you, or maybe support some of the things that you're doing, or whatever, what's the best way to do that? I know you're on Instagram and some places, but how do you want to connect with folks that might want to follow up?
Probably the best way is through LinkedIn. I have a personal LinkedIn profile. It's just under my name, Theron Skees. But I also have a business page for the Designers Creative Studio. So that's probably the biggest connection element for me. In fact, I get all of my work is through. I would love to say, as you did, Don, that I've got this beautiful sales funnel. And although I do have a sales funnel that was put together with duct tape and bubble gum, most of the clients that I get is through word of mouth, and the majority of that comes through LinkedIn. I also have a website that if anyone is interested in, they can certainly go there and learn a lot more about what I do and the practice that I actually created over the last 30 years called Narrative Experience Design. And that's at a website called Designers Creative Studio. Check that out. There's a lot of materials on there that talk about narrative experience design and quite a lot of information there. So hope to connect with some of your listeners soon.
And all of our listeners can go to kingdomgrowthengine.com and look at the tools that we've created that keep you engaged and just help really serve those clients well, even for a greater purpose than just the paycheck, because that's what the legacy really is. And Theron, you've done a masterful job of that. It's been so much a pleasure to do it. Hope you have a great rest of the week, and let's have coffee soon, okay?
Absolutely. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Consulting Kingdom. You've discovered valuable insights and strategies to enhance your consulting practice and to make a meaningful kingdom impact in your corner of the world. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on your favorite platform. Your feedback helps us to reach more consultants like you. To experience the Kingdom Growth Engine software firsthand and to stay connected, follow us on social media and visit our website at kingdomgrowthengine.com. Until next time, continue practicing your consulting skills, offer your assistance generously, bring value wherever you go, and serve with the heart of a king. Cheers!